Welcome to the webinar for the National Endowment for the Arts Dance Program, and thank you for joining us. I'm Nikki Estes, Director of Presenting and Touring at South Arts. I manage many of our grant programs, the Dance Touring Initiative, and our Momentum program. I want to let you know that this presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website by tomorrow. Please revisit it if you need to and share it with your peers. South Arts remains committed to advancing Southern vitality through the arts, even during these uncertain times. In our effort to connect artists in the South to resources that will increase opportunities for success, we invited the National Endowment for the Arts to host a presentation for Southern dance companies. In partnership with the endowment, we planned today's presentation before the pandemic and felt that we should proceed with some necessary adjustments. We have a strong and long-standing partnership with the endowment, and Sarah Nash, the Director of Dance at the Endowment for the Arts and former Director for the National Dance Project. And we are always delighted to have such strong supporters of the dance field share information about their resources. If you have questions, please use the Q&A box to write your questions, and we'll be sure to answer them at the end of today's presentation. Now, I would like to turn the presentation over to Sarah Nash.
Hi, thanks, Nikki, and also thanks, Ethan, and thanks to all of you who are joining us today. I'm really thankful in this moment to be able to connect with you all virtually. It certainly has taken on, I think, a different meaning than it did when Nikki and I originally talked about going ahead and having this webinar, which feels like many, many years ago, even though I think it was just back in January. So again, thank you. And I also just want to let you know that along with myself, both of the dance specialists at the Arts Endowment, Juliana Michelli and Kate Folsom, are also on this call. So all three of us will be available to respond to different questions. And I really want you all to know too that all three of us are, we are here. The Arts Endowment is open for business. We're all working remotely. But you can call our phone numbers, which are on our website, and we'll post at the end. Or email us to get in touch, to talk about anything that's going on with your organization, questions that you have. We're here and we want to be able to connect with you all as much as possible. All right, next slide, please. So I think many of you probably know about us, but just to kind of go over some of the basics about the Arts Endowment. We were established in 1965, and we are an independent federal agency. We're also the largest arts funder in the United States, public or private, and we're able to support the arts in all 50 states, the U.S. territories, and the District of Washington, D.C., and we work to ensure that all 435 congressional districts receive funding from the Arts Endowment for arts projects every single year. We are also, as Nikki mentioned, a project partner with every state and the U.S. territories, as well as with the 6 regional arts organizations and other federal agencies and their departments. Next slide. All right, so some of you have probably been following the news closely and have heard about the recently passed CARES Act, which does include $75 million in funding that will be coming through the National Endowment for the Arts. This is all very new information, but what I wanted to share with you all in today's call, which is basically what we know too right now, is that the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act, is intended to prevent, prepare for, and of course respond to coronavirus domestically or internationally. And the National Endowment for the Arts is working as quickly as possible with the Office of Management and Budget to develop the required guidelines and the application and award timelines for the $75 million provided in the CARES Act for the arts community. It's important to note that the legislation requires that 40% be distributed to the state and the regional arts organizations in their areas, so that they can go ahead and make awards to arts organizations in their particular states and regions. And then 60% will be given out by the Arts Endowment in the form of direct grants to the field. You know, we understand what an urgent time this is, but we do appreciate your patience as these details are worked out. And please know that the Arts Endowment is doing all that we can to serve the arts community, which we know is just being so profoundly impacted by this crisis. So if you haven't seen already, if you could go to the next slide, please. I also want to make sure that everybody knows about the Arts Endowment's COVID-19 page. On this page, we have information, FAQs that we are updating. So, you know, we tried to get the word out about the FAQs as soon as they went up, but they are being continually updated as additional changes take place. So, you know, bookmark it, come back and visit it. We're trying to make it, you know, as much of a resource as possible. And in addition to the FAQs for both applicants and current grantees, there's also a page with links to additional government resources and nationwide resources for artists and arts organizations. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knows about that as well. Okay. Next slide. And this is basically just the FAQ page, which again, you know, we're updating frequently. And there are a number of things that you all can do directly if you are a current grantee. But again, I want to stress that, you know, please get in touch with myself or Juliana or Kate, you know, via email, or give us a call on the phone if you want to talk through any of the options to make sure you understand what the options are. And what sort of might be best for you. We really want to be able to support you in all the ways that we can while you all are facing, you know, everything that is taking place right now. Okay, next page or slide. All right, so, you know, as of now, you know, our next Grants for Arts projects deadline, which is the grant program that we'll be talking about for the rest of this webinar, is proceeding as planned. Of course, a lot could change between now and July 9th. So again, make sure that you are staying up to date and staying in touch with us. But we're gonna basically go through the rest of this webinar talking about, in sort of a pre-pandemic world, the guidelines and the eligibility and the review process and how everything works. So that's kind of, we're gonna shift gears and put on a really optimistic hat for this next part. So basically, all applications that come in through the Grants for Arts projects, which if some of you previously have applied through Artworks, it's the same program, it's just been renamed. So it's now called Grants for Arts Projects. And all of the applications that we get through DANCE for Grants for Arts Projects receive 3 different levels of review. The first level is a citizen panel. So that's really made up of people like you, experts in the field. We try to have it be as representative of as much of the dance community as possible. And we really look for diversity in a number of different ways that diversity can be embodied. So that would be geography around the country. And that's through having people come from different states, but also from rural areas, urban areas, and in between. as well as gender, ethnicity, and certainly different kinds of dance expertise and experience in the dance field. Generally speaking, there's between 5 to 6 people that would serve on a panel at one time. And each of those panels reviews about 40-ish applications, just depending on how many we get and how many panels we have for each deadline. And also, there is also one layperson that's part of the panel review. So that's someone who is knowledgeable about dance, but doesn't work in the profession of dance. So they might be, you know, who knows, all kinds of different things, but maybe they grew up dancing or used to study dance, and hopefully still go see lots of dance performances. And generally speaking, the panels have about 4 to 5 weeks to review all of the applications. Then the second level, after the panels take place, is that those panel recommendations get submitted to the National Council on the Arts for review and approval. And the council, they meet several times a year to review all of the recommended grants, and there's always a public portion of that meeting. So if you weren't aware of that, you know, definitely, again, stay tuned. Usually those meetings take place in October or March of every year, and there's always a public session that you can live stream in case you want to watch it yourself. And then the National Council makes its recommendations to the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts, and the chairman provides that final level of review and approval. And one of the things that we always want to make sure that everybody knows is that anybody who applies to us is able to get feedback about their application, whether you are recommended for a grant or whether you're not recommended for a grant. You can get in touch with us and speak with us to get a sense of, you know, what the feedback was, what the questions were, and that's something that we really encourage you all to do. Okay, next slide, please. So the Grants for Organizations, as I kind of mentioned, Grants for Arts Project is our main grant program at the Arts Endowment, and it's the one that we're really going to spend time talking about today. It was formerly called Artworks, but some of the other grant programs that we have at the Arts Endowment, just in case you want to do a little bit more research or find out about these later on, are Challenge America, Our Town, and our Office of Research also has their own research grants that they offer at deadlines throughout the year. But the Grants for Arts Projects are the largest grants that we offer, and nonprofit organizations receive the bulk of our direct funding. And again, we are going to be focusing on that. And right now, the next deadline for Grants for Arts Projects is July 9th. All right, next slide. So, Grants for Arts Projects. In 2019, we awarded $4 million through Grants for Arts Projects in dance. And since 1966, we've awarded $285 million in dance. Organizations need to have a 3-year history of arts programming in order to be eligible. And applications can be submitted at either the February or the July deadline each year, but not both. So you do have to choose. But one question we get a lot is, you know, if I came in at the February deadline last year, does that mean that I have to come in at the February deadline every year? No. You can only have one application per calendar year, but if it makes sense for you to come in at the February deadline one year, and the next time you apply, it makes sense for you to come in at the July deadline for various reasons, that's totally okay. Eligible project types for dance. One of the things that I like to talk about here is the fact that there's really a large number or a large range of different kinds of eligible dance projects. And if you haven't taken a look at the guidelines that we have on our website, if you want to read through it more comprehensively later, I definitely encourage you to do that, because it really can be all kinds of different things, from residencies that support artistic research, certainly the creation of new work, the touring or the premiere of work. It can also be restaging historically significant works, so it does not have to be a brand new work. All kinds of different presentation and touring options. Also preservation and archive projects. I know that this is a really big area of need in the field, and we're seeing a lot of work and different initiatives happening around the country around documentation and preservation and archiving. So that's something that I want to highlight, because you can come to us for those kinds of projects. Also professional development and services, or education and community engagement projects in dance. So there's really a very large range. We fund large and small projects, existing and new projects, and projects that are taking place in any part of the 50 states, Washington, D.C., and the U.S. territories. All of the grants do require a one-to-one cost share or match, and the grants range from $10,000 to $100,000. And we really do, we give a lot of $10,000 grants. We have a lot of small organizations that apply to us for smaller projects, and then everything, a lot of mid-sized organizations and larger organizations with larger scope projects. So we really do kind of see a full range there in the dance discipline. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is basically just the different types of organizations that the National Endowment for the Arts can fund. So that's nonprofits, which would be your 501c3 organizations, but also local government agencies, nonprofit educational institutions, as well as federally recognized tribal communities. Generally speaking, the majority of our grants do go to nonprofit organizations and organizations that offer arts programming. And we also award grants to other organizations, again, such as universities, colleges, who are doing, dance projects in our case. So, next slide, please. All right, so there are some things, some other eligibility requirements that you kind of need to have met or have in place before you're able to actually get to work on your arts endowment application. One is that you have to have what's called a DUNS number, which stands for, and you would get that from dunsandbradstreet.com. Although I do want to highlight that process and requirement is changing, and that's an external to the Arts Endowment, but we do have updated information about what that change is and what that means for potential grantees on our website. So you can find out some more information about it there. You do also need to be registered with both grants.gov and sam.gov. SAM stands for System of Award Management. And we definitely encourage you to make sure that you have all three of those registrations, well in advance of a deadline, just in case anything kind of gets slowed up or you encounter any glitches or problems, just to give yourself time for those registrations to happen, because those are, again, external agencies from us. You need to also have a 3-year history of programming. And again, the one-to-one non-federal cost match. And you also need to be able to meet the reporting requirements. So, understanding what's going to be required of you if you get a federal grant, and what those reporting requirements will involve. In terms of the one-to-one non-federal cost match, just an example of what that means is that an organization who applied to us and received a $10,000 grant, you'd need to provide at least $10,000 coming from another non-federal source. So that could be income from ticket sales or private foundations, other kinds of fundraising streams or revenue streams that are not from another federal agency. And one of the questions that we get about that a lot is, does the match have to actually be in hand at the time that you apply? No. We don't expect that given our long timeline, but we do ask you to just indicate, as part of the application, where you anticipate requesting the other, the matching funds or funds above that from, and sort of give the panelists an idea of that. All right. Next slide, please. So we do want to go over some of the things that funding is not, can't be used for. The first of which, we have the full list of that on our website. So I definitely encourage you to read through all of that. But just to pull out a couple things here. We do, as the kind of very literal title would suggest, grants for arts projects. We fund arts projects, so we're not able to do just a blanket general operating support or seasonal support through the Grants for Arts Projects program. So, you can't necessarily come in, you can't come in for your entire season of every single artist that you might be presenting, or if you're a dance company, and you have education programs, and you also have creation and touring of a new work, and you also have some of the things, you need to kind of pick, what your project is going to be and really focus your application on a particular project within that. Again, the CARES Act, which just passed, which is for the COVID-19 relief, that is not what we're talking about here. That's going to have different kinds of requirements. So I just want to, make that differentiation. Some other things that our Grants for Arts Project funding cannot be used for would be for creating a brand new organization, facility construction, lobbying, or political activity related to lobbying. And also we can't accept applications from fiscal sponsors. So, so again, just to make sure you sort of know what all of those things are. And again, if you look at that list and you're not sure if it applies to you or not, or applies to the project that you were thinking about, give us a call, send us an email, we'll talk about it. All right, next slide, please. So on our website, there's a lot of information, and there are a lot of resources on our website. So you can find certainly all of the guidelines for all of our grant opportunities. If you go to www.arts.gov, then you'll go there and you will select grants from the tabs shown here. And then in the drop down, you would select apply for a grant. And next slide. And then here, you'll select grants for arts organizations. And next slide. Then you would select grants for arts projects. And you might want to bookmark this page so you don't have to go through all of those layers again. And then next slide. If you're applying for a grant in the dance discipline, which we hope you all would be, then you would select dance under the discipline box that you see on the right side of the screen. And next slide. This is going to take you to the Grants for Arts Projects dance specific page. As you see at the top, guidelines, dance. So I'd also encourage you to go ahead and bookmark this page. And on the right side of the screen, you would choose how to prepare and submit an application. This really is a gem of a resource. So it really gives you an overview of the entire application process. So if you didn't understand or catch something that that we talk about today on the webinar, you can go here and read through it. Or if you're better at visual learning than you are at auditory learning, then you can really find a whole step-by-step through the application process. And I also want to point out that there are links in this same box that will take you directly to the step 1 instructions for the application and the step 2 instructions for the application. Okay, next slide. So basically, as I just kind of mentioned, it's a 2-step process. So the first step is going to submit what's called the SF424 form. Again, this happens through grants.gov. And the deadline as of now is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on July 9th. We recommend, if at all possible, that you really get this basic form in, a week in advance, as soon as you can, so that if you encounter any issues that come up with grants.gov or anything like that, you've got time to resolve them before you hit the deadline. Extensions due to a missed deadline from us are pretty rare. Grants.gov is the federal portal for submitting grants to the U.S. government, and we don't manage grants.gov. As I mentioned, it's a separate entity from us, so you do need to contact grants.gov if you run into any issues when you're submitting that part of the application, and they can help you troubleshoot. So again, I know the reality is that you all are always, even in non-pandemic times, juggling a lot of different deadlines, juggling a lot of different demands on your time. Some of you are probably your artistic director and development director and marketing director and everything else. But again, just try to give yourself as much time in advance as possible. And then the second part of the application is the full application, and that's going to have the things that you would normally, the narrative questions and the full budgets and those kinds of things. And the portal opens back up for a week, and for the July deadline, it will open up again from July 14th, and then it's due at 11:59 p.m. on July 21st, and that's again Eastern Time. Although I think probably everybody on this call is in the Eastern time zone. But again, you can prepare the materials ahead of time by using the dance instructions that I mentioned earlier. And it's always good practice to, prepare your narrative questions and all of those kinds of things in Google Docs or Word or some other kind of document so that you can really save those changes and you and your staff can have easy access to that application without having to, log into grants.gov and things like that. Anyway, for the second part of the application, if you have any questions, go ahead and be in touch with us directly for any assistance during the second part of the application process. Okay, next slide. Again, I just want to point out that there are a lot of online resources, and there's sample applications. We have past webinars that we have recorded that you can watch at whatever time of day or night you have available to watch them to kind of take you through step by step. It sort of shows you the whole life cycle of an application process. As well as, of course, if you need it, grants.gov support and SAM help. So definitely take advantage of all of those different kinds of resources as you need them. Okay. Next slide, please. So some helpful hints. Again, we've talked about this before, but we do just like to repeat it. Really start as far in advance as you're able to, particularly with the grants.gov and sam.gov registrations, and make sure that your sam.gov registration won't expire before the deadline. That's sometimes something that happens and can take longer to resolve than you'd like. Again, be in touch with us. If you're not sure, you've got a couple different projects in mind and you're not really sure which one might be the best fit, give us a call, send us an email. We're happy to kind of talk through the different options with you. And again, you know, a lot of times we'll be doing webinars such as this. And since this is being recorded, you know, South Arts will post this, so you can come back and watch this one, and all the online resources that we have on arts.gov. And then, you know, once, let's see. Yeah, sorry, lost my place. One of the things, you know, we have posted some selected application narratives, again, from those kind of sample applications. So if you've never, you know, if you're new to grant writing or you're new to our grant writing and our application, I do think checking out those sample applications, you know, they're not meant to be prescriptive, as in it should be this type of project, but they're there to just give an example in case that's helpful for you of what, you know, applications that have been funded, you know, how they talked about their project and how they responded, you know, the kinds of information that they provided to the panelists. And again, you can always request feedback on any of your applications, whether you're recommended for a grant or not. Next slide. So some additional helpful hints. You know, one of the things that we always try to talk to people about is to just think of the overall arch of this as, you know, why this particular project and why now? You know, what's really driving you in this moment in time? Why does it feel important to you? And try to, you know, try to infuse the application, you know, with that, so that the panelists really understand, you know, how this project came about, why you're continuing it, if it's a continuing project, or why you might be, you know, starting it right now. You know, don't assume also that the panelists know about your organization. Again, we have, you know, we have a wide range of people who are serving on our panels who've got expertise in different kinds of dance forms, who work in different kinds of settings, and who are, you know, who have been in the field for different amounts of time, including people who are newer in the field. So, you know, try to rule out any potential questions that a panelist might have, and don't assume that they know about you or your work. We also really encourage you to talk about how you're going to do something and not just what you're going to do. You really want to try to connect those dots, and try to give the panelists as much detail as you're able to. Also, so the review criteria that we use, which is given to us by our congressional legislation, is the review criteria of artistic excellence and artistic merit. So just to give you some information about what those criteria mean for us, artistic excellence, and I know that excellence can be kind of a loaded word in the field, but for us, this really is looking at, you know, the quality of the artists or the arts organizations, the arts education providers, the works of art, or the services that a project is going to involve. And artistic merit includes a number of different, it's sort of a big bucket that a lot of stuff falls into. So I'm going to highlight a couple things that fall under artistic merit for us, which is the potential to celebrate America's creativity and cultural heritage, to invite mutual respect for differing beliefs and values, and to enrich humanity. It also involves the importance of a project to the artistic field, to the artists that are going to be involved, to the audience and community that is going to be involved. We also look at the appropriateness of the project to an organization's mission or to their community. We look at capacity in terms of, you know, an ability to carry out the project. And we look at that, you know, the panelists look at that through factors such as the appropriateness of the budget, you know, are the project goals clear? Is there a clear, you know, project design for it to be carried out? You know, is there sort of, does it seem like all of the other resources or partnerships that might need to be in place are in place, or there's a plan for finding them and putting them in place. So all of those kinds of things, as well as the project's personnel. And that can be the artists, it can also be the staff, anybody who's really going to be a big partner on the project. Again, there's a number of other things that fall under the artistic merit, but we don't have time to kind of go through all of them, so I'm just going to encourage you to read the full definitions of artistic excellence and artistic merit on arts.gov. And again, get in touch with us and start early. And the last helpful hint that I just want to give, which actually is something that Kate says a lot, which I think is really great advice for any grant writing program. But you want to make sure that your application and all the different parts of the application are really telling the same story, right? So you want to make sure that your application, that the narrative, is telling the same story that the budget is telling. And then you want to make sure that the work samples are also really supporting that same story. So so if you just kind of think about it as like a story arc and wanting to make sure that all of the different components of the application really align and make sense together, I think that that's also a really great approach to help you put together a strong application that panelists, will be able to get all of the information, and you'll be able to connect the dots for them. Okay, next slide, and we are nearing the end. And this is really just a plug kind of for all of our really great state and regional partnerships. Obviously, if you're on this webinar, then you definitely know about South Arts, which is great. But some of the other regional arts organizations do have national programs, including for dance. So if you're not familiar with the other regional arts organizations, here they are. And dance specifically, I would point you towards New England Foundation for the Arts, because they have the National Dance Project, and so that's also a potential resource for you and your work. All right, last slide. As I mentioned when I was talking about the different levels of review, we are always looking for panelists. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, and you'd like to be a panelist for us, we do have this volunteer form that's directly on our website that you can go on and fill out. But I actually, a simpler way is also just to send us an email saying, hey, I was on the South Arts webinar. I'm really interested in serving as a panelist. Keep me in mind. And that's a really great way, because again, we're looking for, anywhere from like 20 to 30 panelists per deadline. So, so we hope you might be interested in serving. All right, and then go ahead to the next slide, and I think we can also go ahead and open this up for questions, and I'm gonna take a break from talking because that was a lot of talking at you all, so thank you for staying tuned in and listening.
Hey, Sarah. So just a reminder, if you have a question, to type your question in the Q&A box that you should see either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your settings. And Ethan Masia with South Arts will capture those questions and present them to the National Endowment for the Arts dance team.
No questions.
I'll give you a moment to type in a question.
And if you don't have any right now, but you get into starting to look at some of the online resources or thinking about applying, that's when a lot of the questions, might start to pop up. So this is by no means your only chance.
Okay, we have one question. Will there be a similar webinar for CARES?
I'm not sure yet. I think that's a great idea, but I'm not sure. We're really working hard to, get the guidelines and the timeline on that first. But stay tuned. And again, that FAQ page is where we'll be, putting up all kinds of updates as we get them about that. So, so stay tuned.
Last year, there was an indication of interest in projects surrounding the centennial of suffrage. Is there anything similar this year?
Yes, if you look at the full dance guidelines, you'll see that there are some different initiatives that the chairman has included in our guidelines across all the disciplines, not the women's suffrage anymore, since applications this year would be for projects taking place in 2021 or a little later. But I know one of them that I'll just highlight is around historically Black colleges and universities. We do have an initiative around HBCUs. And so certainly, you know, that's included there. And they change from year to year. I do want to note that those are not requirements, so you don't have to have a project that involves any of those, you know, any of those kind of certain identified areas. So, you know, don't get hung up on that if you don't. We still want you to apply.
Are you able to save your application in grants.gov and continue to work on it, or do you have to enter all the information at one time?
Want me to answer, Sarah?
Yes, great.
I can jump in. This is Kate Folsom speaking, one of the dance specialists. Hello, everyone. No, so your application does not actually live in grants.gov. The SF424 that Sarah talked about earlier actually is just a quick form, an indication that you want federal funding. So that just has your contact information, just letting us know that you want to apply to this particular grant program at this deadline. The applicant portal, which is part 2 of the application, is where the content of your application will live. And yes, it is savable, but ideally you will have a copy of your most up-to-date information saved on your own computer, just in case. It certainly doesn't hurt to have that, but it is something that's savable and you can kind of come back to during that week-long period that the applicant portal is open. And you should only have one staff person working in your application at a time. If different people are on different computers working in it, you could be overwriting each other. So that's a cautionary tale of saving your application in the applicant portal for step 2.
This person says, we're working on our nonprofit status now. Do we need to have 3 years of programming as a nonprofit before we can apply? Or do our years of experience before nonprofit status count?
They do. So you do not have to have 3 years as a nonprofit organization, as long as you have 3 years of programming and then become a nonprofit, then that works.
Would the grants being offered support artistic consultant fees specific to the project we are seeking funds for, as opposed to general operations, payroll, etc.?
Yes. So definitely artistic fees, any other consultant or designer fees, all of that are direct project costs that you would include in your project budget. And you can also include in your project budget a portion of staff salaries that are specific to that project. So some staff salary support can certainly be involved in the project budget, but absolutely artistic fees 100%, yes.
Can you speak to those who are not nonprofits but work with fiscal agents and sponsors? Are they non-eligible?
Unfortunately, they are not eligible to apply to us in dance. So you do have to be your own 501c3 or one of the other eligible organization types in order to apply to us. Any other questions?
I think that may be it.
Yep. All right.
So you all can see Sarah, Juliana's, and Kate's contact information on the slide. And I think I heard Sarah mention a couple of times that they encourage applicants to contact them with questions. So if you will take note of their emails, if you have a question after today, please do reach out. Any final words, Sarah?
No, just thank you. Thank you, Nikki and Ethan. Thanks, Juliana and Kate, for also being on this. And thank you to all of you. Oh, we do have one more question that just popped up.
For anyone interested in volunteering to review grants, how would they recuse themselves from familiar organization grants should it come up?
That's a great question. So typically, depending on how many applications we get per deadline, which is anywhere from like 135 or 130 to 150, we'll have for each deadline anywhere from 3 to 4 panels. And so as part of the panelist approval process, you go through the different applications, a list of them, and you're able to identify any that you have a conflict with according to our conflict of interest policies. And basically we would just sort them, if you're assigned to panel A and you have a conflict of interest with 3 or 4 organizations, we would just make sure that those organizations end up in one of the other panels. And then if you're reading the applications that are part of your panel and suddenly you see a partner organization identified in an application that you have a conflict of interest with, you would alert us and let us know right away. And then you would go ahead and recuse yourself from that application. And we have different protocols in place for handling that when it comes up. So I guess.
Ethan, were there any other questions?
I don't believe so.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah, Juliana, and Kate, and also many thanks to all of you that are participating today. We hope that today's presentation was helpful in better understanding the National Endowment for the Arts grants that support dance. We're wishing all of you the best and be well.
Take care. Thanks, everyone.